hello there. My name is Brent Smith, and I'm the Common Constitutionalist, and this is the Common Constitutionalist audio version of the Common Constitutionalist Weekend video podcast. And the reason why it's an audio podcast is because I actually went out, did the entire video for the podcast, and the hurricane-style winds were such that I couldn't get out of it no matter where I went. So I replayed the video and you couldn't hear my voice, and since it's such a wonderful songbird type of voice, I knew everybody'd want to hear what I had to say. So anyway, I'm back inside and I'm going to just do the audio and suck it up, and next week, that's be fabulous. Back to the video. So anyway, this week's audio podcast is entitled Immigration, Nothing New Under the Sun. By me, Brent Smith, the Common Constitutionalist. Okay, so if you dig deep enough and sometimes far enough back, you'll discover that there really isn't anything new under the sun, as the saying goes. It just means that there aren't any new ideas, so to speak. New ideas are just rehashing of something, and something that someone sometimes hundreds or thousands of years ago came up with, suggested, or implemented. So maybe technology might be the closest thing to something new, but even that, if you look hard enough, the case can't really even be made for that, because as we've seen in old sci-fi movies, most of the stuff that we're coming up with, science used to be sci-fi, used to be science fiction, and now it's science and technology. So that isn't even new. So, you might be asking yourself, what does this have to do with immigration? Well, because Trump's new border czar, I hate that word czar, is suggesting a lot of new and radical stuff that's not exactly new. So that's what we're going to be discussing today on the Weekend Common Constitutionalist audio podcast. Be right back.
You are listening to the Common Constitutionalist, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, free from the prying eyes of establishment black helicopters.
Okay, I'm back. Let's get into this. From the Conservative Review, President Donald Trump announced that former acting Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Thomas Homan would be this administration's new border czar. He announced that on Friday morning. And don't you just love the way Trump does stuff? It's classic, man. Quote, Tom Homan's coming back, and I would say that would be announced next week, except I'd rather announce it now, unquote, President Trump said in an interview with Fox and Friends. Quote, he's going to be very much involved with the border. Gee, shocking, because he's the border czar. But I interject. That's what really, and this is a quote from him, again, Trump, that's what he really wants to be involved with, unquote. So who is Thomas Homan, and what's he going to be bringing to the job, so to speak? Well, here are a few things you need to know from Conservative Review. He used to be the acting ICE director from 2014 to 2018 and was the director during the original 2014, quote, unaccompanied alien children, unquote, crisis. Next, before he started working a federal beat as Border Patrol agent, and he was actually a Border Patrol agent, so he's worked his way up the ranks, Homan worked as a police officer in New York State, just like his Faja. You know, Faja, Dad. Hat tip, gold member. So, okay, next. He believes the most effective way of deterring border crossers is to start deporting people with final deportation orders. Oh, what a concept. All right, so this next one, you got to listen tight and you got to remember it, because it's going to resurface later on in the audio podcast. He once suggested that ICE should conduct a, quote, nationwide operation to locate, arrest, and remove those who have entered the U.S. illegally, including family units, unquote, who have been given deportation orders. Remember that. He also once called for a 400% increase in worksite immigration raids in California. I'm sure that would have come up empty, right? Sure. He's an equal opportunity enforcer, once saying that no population is off the table for immigration enforcement. And this is an important point because when everybody thinks of illegal immigration, what do they think of? They think of Mexicans, Guatemalans, Hondurans, El Salvadorans, whatever. But there's a lot more than just Latinos, shall we say, crossing the border. There's tons of Africans. There's people from the Eastern Bloc, Baltic state countries, the old Soviet Union countries, Europeans. There's Asians. There's Indians, not Indians. Not Indians. They're already here. Sorry, was that a trigger warning or a trigger word? Pardon me if I offended somebody. He once defended ICE's Trump-era practice of going after non-criminal illegal immigrants. We shouldn't wait for them to become a criminal, unquote, unquote. But that's too late because the minute to cross the border, they were, what? Oh, yes, that's right, criminals. And he says, quote, many of the gang members ICE has arrested for the past few years enter the U.S. at the southern border as part of a family unit or as unaccompanied alien children. And ain't that just the way? Because what do we think of when we think of unaccompanied minors? We think of little babies, little tots in diapers, walking about, crying their eyes off, waiting for mommy or daddy to show up. No, a lot of these kids are 16, 17 and a half-year-old MS-13 gang members that are called unaccompanied minors because I guess technically if they're not 18, they're minors. Give me a freaking break. Conservative Review continues. He's no fan of sanctuary jurisdiction policies, once lamented how his officers couldn't even get access to incarcerated illegal immigrants in Chicago. Ooh, gee, what a shocker. He's also seen firsthand the relationship between sanctuary policies and the expansion of the drug trade. Again, shocker. Okay, so that's Tom Homan. That's who this guy is. And wow, he sure does sound like a bad guy, doesn't he? He's an anti-immigrant, he's a racist, and probably hates children, and he probably even hates puppies, too. So there you go. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back for my thoughts.
You're listening to the Common Constitutionalist. Let the truth be known.
Okay, so we got all that. That's who Tom Homan is, and he's an evil guy, isn't he? So now let's contrast that with what I wrote several years ago, 5 years ago? Yeah, 4 or 5, I guess it was 4 years ago, about what actually happened approximately 66 years ago. So this is an article that yours truly wrote back in 2015 after Trump just started talking about illegal immigration. He just got into the race, and one of his high points that he wanted to hit on was illegal immigration. And he was a tough-talking son of a gun. That's where he made his bones right off the bat. And so I wrote back then, way back yonder, there are things about Donald Trump's immigration platform I like and are doable, and things that are kind of absurd and unconstitutional, not to mention progressive. Now, recall that I was a Ted Cruz, dyed-in-the-wool constitutionalist Ted Cruz guy back then, but again, when Trump started talking, making sense about illegal immigration, man, he was, like I said, he was making some sense, and I was liking it. Building the Trump wall, remember the Trump wall with the big, beautiful doors and everything? That was awesome. Got to bring that sucker back. Anyway, so building the Trump wall across the southern border with a few large doors is a good idea. I think most reasonable conservatives would agree. I think most reasonable anybody should agree, at least. However, making Mexico pay for it, now again, this is back in 2015 I wrote this, making Mexico pay for it is both ridiculous and unrealistic. I suppose he could try, but mostly I think it's just populist bombast that sells good to the public, and that it did. And I guess I guess it's supposed to show how tough he is. And indeed, it turns out, hey, he is tough. He's tough as freaking He's the toughest president I think we've ever had. I mean, other than the thugs in the White House like Woodrow Wilson and FDR and Johnson and those guys, those progressive thugs. But tariffs, I write, remittance payments and trade restrictions will not, nor should they, pay for the wall. Why? We can blame Mexico and Central American countries, but we did this to ourselves, so we're the ones that should pay for it. And I still hold true to that. This is our doing, not theirs. And I write, that's my whole point about this whole tariff bullcrap. Why are they coming? No one is forcing them. It's the old, if you build it, they will come deal. The incentive to come for an easier life is provided by us morons in the United States. We elect these a-holes that wrote these policies attracting illegals. Birthright citizenship, catch and release, no physical border at all. It's absurd is what it is. If the incentive were taken away, fact is they wouldn't come. At least very, very few would come. Probably about 5% of what are currently coming now. So even with the wall, that's not going to stop them all. It sure as hell is going to slow them down, no doubt about it. But as long as that carrot is out there, all those things I just mentioned and more, they'll just keep coming. They're going to find a way in. My point is that we're, by the tariffs and all that other stuff, we're just deflecting the blame to Mexico and these other countries for not doing enough. It's not their frickin' problem. It's our fault and it's our problem. And what many Republicans are really supporting, what supporters are all jazzed about, is not just the wall, but it's the idea of deporting all illegal invaders. That and all the sanctuary cities, getting rid of them. And on this point, the left, the moderates, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Republican Party are all spastic over this, or at least they were back in 2015. So back then, 4 years ago, Ross Kaminsky at the American Spectator echoes the establishment voice quite nicely as he writes, quote, Mr. Trump wants to remove all illegal aliens from the United States. This is, of course, impossible. This is what he's writing. This is, of course, impossible. And even if it were possible, an outrageous waste of tens of hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars. When asked by Chuck Todd of NBC's Meet the Depressed, he didn't write Meet the Depressed, I did, if he should split up, he being Trump, should split up families in which one or more of the parents is an illegal alien but their children are U.S. citizens, Trump said no, clarifying one of the most, listen to this, reprehensible statements I've ever heard from an American candidate for public office. He said, Trump said, if you recall, quote, we're going to keep the families together, but they have to go, unquote. So while I agree that you can't just deny the existence of the 14th Amendment and deport citizens, and that's unfortunately the way it is right now, so until we change things like that or get rid of that stupid frickin' Supreme Court precedent, I hate precedent, I would have preferred that Donald Trump followed up with his infamous "they have to go" statement with the citizen has a choice statement, I guess. As a citizen, he or she, assuming they are not transgender and they don't know who they are or what they are, they can stay in this country or they can feel free to leave with their illegal family. It's your choice, folks. Sure, it's not their fault that their parents or whomever is here illegally, but it's not ours either. Remember that. Yet both the left and the establishment right, as did Kaminsky, that even the suggestion is immoral. And that's what they always claim, that it's an immorality to separate families. They don't have to be separated. It's their choice. Leave the citizen child behind or take him with you. There you go. So let's take a break. I'll be right back for more fun and frivolity over illegal immigration. Yeah, baby.
You're listening to The Common Constitutionalist. Let the truth be known.
All right, welcome back again. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry that you're not watching because I'm so handsome. Yeah, right. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. At least I know you don't have to get the weather report since I'm inside, so the weather's just fine. At any rate, so let's get back to it. Now, as for the impossibility, remember Nimrod Kaminsky said that this, of course, is impossible, and even if it were possible, an outrageous waste of billions of dollars. Remember he said that? Yeah, well, I do. So now as for the impossibility and the cost involved of deporting all illegal aliens, this is just absolute freaking nonsense. It's the typical tired argument we always hear. The cost of deporting, this is a fact, at least it was back in 2015, and it probably might be maybe 10 or 20 billion dollars more, or probably just $10 billion more. Just 10 billion, I love that. The cost of deporting all illegals is estimated to be around 50 billion dollars. Yeah, that's a lot of money, you're right, if you had to keep on shelling it out every few years, but that's what the wall is for. You build the wall, then you deport the illegals, then they leave and you close the door behind them and say, adios. That's what you say. And by the way, it's not impossible. It's been done before, and with relative ease, actually. Of course, it was last done in a time when being an American actually meant something. Now, for a lot of people, most Democrats and even some Republicans, it doesn't mean jack squat. So, I continued, writing that is, the year was 1953, and 3 million illegal aliens were residing in the United States. That doesn't seem like much by today's standards, but back in 53, our population was just a fraction of what it is now, and that is, in fact, a fact. And it was the same year that one of America's greatest generals became president, Dwight D, Like Ike, Eisenhower. Ike called it the way he saw it, being quoted in a New York Times article. Dig this, the New York Times actually printed this. Quote, the rise in illegal border crossing by Mexican, dig this, wetbacks, these are his words, the President of the United States, quote, the rise in illegal border crossing by Mexican wetbacks to a current rate of more than 1 million cases a year, okay, and that's rivaling or surpassing what we're doing right now. So, this is about the same, 1 million cases a year, has been accompanied by a curious relaxation in ethical standards extending all the way from farmers' exploiters of this contraband labor to the highest levels of the federal government, unquote. That was Ike. Now, a couple of things right off the bat should have jumped right out at you. First, the fact, like I said, the New York Times would ever publish such a thing. And second, just imagine Trump or George Bush or anybody, any senator, any congressman, anyone, much less a president, quoting or saying that passage. Today, you know dang well he'd be perp-walked out of the Oval Office for a hate crime. What else? So, needless to say, it's as you got the idea, Eisenhower had a real problem with illegal aliens. In 1954, he appointed retired General Joseph Swing to head up the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS, which is no more. It's been renamed to whatever, Immigration Customs Enforcement or something like that, and gave him full authority to do whatever he had to do to stop the flow of illegals and deport the ones that were already here. Yeah, I like Ike, buddy. Yeah. Jumpin' Joe, as he was called from his days in the 11th Airborne, got to work and did so, listen to this, and he did so with a mere 1,075 agents. That's it. He tasked 750 of those agents to travel to Southern California and Arizona with a goal to round up 1,000 illegal aliens every day, per day, 1,000 per day. And the operation was called Operation Wetback. Yeah, buddy. Operation Wetback, as they called it, began on June 17, 1954. By the end of July, now remember, this was 65 years ago tomorrow or something like that? By the end of July, which is basically just about a month and a half, they had caught 50,000 illegals in just those two states, California and Arizona. And what happened then is what we've been saying, at least what I've been saying for years. Another 500,000 illegals fled the country on their own rather than be arrested. What's that called? Oh, that's right. It's called self-deportation. And self-deportation is when illegals know an administration is actually serious about deportation. And so that's what happens, and that's what would happen again. Guaran-frickin-tee you. Then the agents that moved on to Texas, where they apprehended another 80,000 quote-unquote wetbacks, and another 700,000, almost 750,000 of them, self-deported after that. These illegals very quickly understood that Eisenhower wasn't going to mess around, and consequently, illegal immigration, dig this, decreased. After they started this program, illegal immigration decreased by 95% in the 50s. 95%. Unbelievable. But completely reasonable and completely logical. And of course, after Ike left office, JFK came back, or was elected, and it was back to the relaxed attitude, and every other president since, including Reagan, unfortunately. Eisenhower proved it could be done if one had the will of a supreme military commander, of course, and we didn't have such a bunch of freaking pansies in this country, or evil leftists that pander to this sort of thing so they can get control of this bloc and this to become an eventual voting bloc. That's what it's really all about. So he was, frankly, on immigration. Ike was the last president to actually do his job according to the law, and that is incredibly sad. So Ike was able to rid us of the flood of almost 3 million illegals with little more than 1,000 agents and a couple years worth of work, and that was it. So it didn't cost $50 freaking billion, and it probably wouldn't cost that now. And frankly, even if it costs 60 or 100 billion, we're spending way more than that every year on illegal immigration. Housing them, feeding them, educating them, the list is endless. So the moral of the story, to end this thing, or the bottom line, is never accept from anybody, left or right, that this simply can't be done. So that's all I've got. My name is Brent Smith. I'm the Common Constitutionalist. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next week, hopefully with a video, but we'll see. Who knows? That's it. I'm out. See ya.